Hello and welcome to another edition of Football 301. I am Matt Harmon. Nate Tice will be joining us later to rank our top 10 coaches in the NFL. But before that, Charles McDonald and I here holding it down. Charles, what's going on, buddy?
Nothing much. Just trying to survive the summer. This is one of the weeks where I feel like where you look at like, oh wow, training camp is 2 weeks away. Okay, about to start getting back into it. But it's a good time because I've been seeing what people are stretching into what becomes content over the past couple of weeks. So I think some fresh football will do us all some good right now.
I mean, dude, you said that so well because I had both feelings this week. I was a little sick over the weekend, so just like literally laid on the couch and tried to not, feel like I was swallowing a knife the whole weekend basically. And I remember at one point sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, training camp is right around the corner." And like just started to think about all of the things that was that needed to be done, both on my end from a work perspective, the whole deal. But then also had that realization of like, I was annoyed at like 3 things I saw on social media over the weekend. The people, people's trying to stretch stuff into content, especially fantasy stuff right now. It's like, come on. And I'm very excited to actually get like new information and new data to talk about because that is sorely needed right now.
Definitely. I mean, it just seems like people are really tense right now, really, really on edge. There's a lot of people around the league in terms of fandom who are waiting to see like what a young quarterback's going to do. So we just need to like rip the Band-Aid off and just move forward. But we're almost there. I think I can make it. Maybe.
I think we can definitely make it. And you bring up a good point that we'll transition here in just a second, but there's a lot of optimism right now. Like I wrote an article today for the site about like who could be the top 5 like value surprising offenses in the league. And it's like I was talking about teams like, hey, maybe the Titans could be a good offense. Maybe like maybe the Seahawks could be a surprise. It's like every team right now feels like has an optimistic case, and that stuff's going to change here real quick very soon. So I'm definitely excited to get some of those new data points, even if once we get those new data points, as soon as training camp happens and then especially into the regular season, we're going to be breaking some hearts. But we're not going to talk too negative here today. We're talking top 10 coaches, obviously, in just a second when Nate joins us for that segment. But before we do that, we want to just kind of talk about some new faces in new places that could make a big impact. I think we have a mix of coaches here because obviously we are doing the coaching pod. So we'll just ping pong back and forth here for a little bit. Charles, give me your first new face, new place who could make a big impact this year.
I put 2 together here for the New Orleans Saints. Head coach Kellen Moore and left tackle Kelvin Banks, who they drafted in the first round this year to try and solidify their offensive line. And really, because their offensive line being good is kind of the only way I see them having like a watchable season this year, at least on offense, So Kellen Moore, obviously we know he's kind of experienced all of it as far as offensive line talent goes. He's coached for the Cowboys, he's coached for the Chargers, and he's a coach for the Eagles. And I think the Saints are they got potential to kind of be on that higher upper end because they do invest in the offensive line. When you look at what they have up front, Eric McCoy's a first round pick, Talise Fuaga's a first round pick, Kelvin Banks a first round pick. So they've really tried to invest here. And if they're going to get off the ground and give Tyler Shuck or whoever ends up starting for them, it will most likely be Shuck at quarterback. I think those 2 people need to have a pretty big season. Then, with the defense, I feel like you can always squint your eyes and see if something happens there, even though they've lost some talent over the past couple of years. But offensive line, that's going to be the key to like their watchability, I guess, this season.
Yeah, it's a great point because I was mentioning that like top 5 value offenses in the league right now. I left the Saints as an honorable mention because I can't really say like an offense that's probably starting Tyler Shuck is going to be, a potential. It's sort of framed as like this year's Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like we're not looking at this team as a top 5 offense, but they finish the season as a top 5 type offense. I can't get there with a team that's starting friggin' Tyler Shuck. But there is a lot of talent on this team. Like Alvin Kamara still had a very good season last year. Obviously this is a big if Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed are healthy, like that's a really nice and very dangerous 1-2 that I think could be really good in this Kellen Moore offense that, you know, weaponizes guys from the slot. We've seen what he's done with like CeeDee Lamb, obviously Keenan Allen in that one season with the Los Angeles Chargers, but even especially Devontae Smith last year running more slot routes than ever. I think like a guy like Olave could really have a monster season with that type of usage, but it comes down to the guys up front. And again, it's one of those things like you plug in a rookie at tackle in Banks, like you think, okay, we've solved the problem, but we have no idea how the guy is actually going to play. So he is definitely a pivotal point for them. And again, the whole offensive line, there's a lot of ifs. This whole offense is basically built on ifs, but if some of these things break right, I could see this being like a watchable unit.
Yeah, they could be one of those teams that you kind of hate to play because they'll have a good offensive line in Kamara, and then, you know, you're just kind of slugging through the rest of it as you try to develop a rookie quarterback. But, you know, you start like looking at some of these teams that you expect to be bottom feeders, and the Saints are one of them. And I still think they're going to be pretty bad this season. But there's a little bit of a core here for just, you know, some positive things to pop for their run game. And if they can run the ball, who knows, maybe they can build some play action stuff on top of it. But Kellen Moore, Kelvin Banks, like those two guys are going to have really big years for the Saints if they're going to, you know, try to take a step forward from where they were last year.
Okay, I'll go with one of mine here. Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly, Las Vegas Raiders. Man, I mean, this is one of those offenses that I think could be really interesting this year to watch. And, you know, I think it's going to be like a bit of a weird kind of funky offense. They're a little bit on my radar especially from a pass game standpoint, that they could be one of those like football hipsters delight, just because how are they going to deploy Jack Besh with Jacoby Myers on the field? Are we going to get a lot of slot stuff from Brock Bowers? Are they going to be more 12 personnel heavy, a little more condensed because they kept Michael Mayer on the roster, which I think was the right decision. I think you should keep, like, there's no reason to trade a guy like that just to trade him. He's probably like a promising player on his rookie contract, but there's like some weird lack of verticality there. There was a lot of pop in minicamp about, hey, Dante Thornton, the 4th round rookie receiver out of Tennessee, like he's actually taking reps with the first team. And, you know, theoretically that makes sense because they do kind of need size and speed on the outside when we're talking about all these tight ends and power slot receivers. But Dante Thornton's coming out of that Looney Tunes Tennessee offense and ran just like all catches, you know, like, is he really ready to start in the NFL? So that's kind of on my radar from the Chip Kelly perspective. I think the run game is going to be fun, but are they going to be more of like a interesting idea than they are an actualized version of the offense? And that sort of just leads me to my point overall about the Raiders, Charles, is that I do think they are going to be better this year. I think they're going to be more buttoned up. They're going to be more professional. It'd be hard to be less professional than they were last year, but they're going to be more buttoned up with Pete Carroll at the helm. But like, how many wins is that actually going to translate to? Because I'm very excited about two of the other teams in the division, and the third team there is the damn Kansas City Chiefs, who go to the Super Bowl every other year.
Yeah, it just on its surface just looks like such a tough division. And I know we've said that in the past about the AFC West, and that hasn't come true, but I mean, I think we have a little bit more proof that this is going to be one of the tougher divisions of football. I mean, we look at where the Broncos were last year on defense, and then some of the upgrades that they've made, trying to see if Dre Greenlaw still something left, sign Hufanga also from the 49ers. Like, that could be one of the best defenses in the league. And then you go look at the Chargers, and personnel-wise, maybe it's not as strong as Denver is on a just on a player-for-player front, but for the good chunk of last season, they were one of the best teams in the league until they ran into some tougher offenses at the end of the season. And then Kansas City is Kansas City. So I think, like, if you're a Raiders fan, probably expecting 7 wins is fair, because I do think Geno gives you at least a functional floor on offense. I don't know really what the ceiling is. We're gonna have to see how some like Chip Kelly's play calling shakes out, how some of the receiving options shake out, Genty, the offensive lineman. There's still a lot of questions here, but at least you have someone who we saw last year in Seattle and over the past couple of years can give you some good play in tough circumstances. And then I guess on defense, you know, I thought it was interesting that you kept Patrick Graham. Patrick Graham is kind of one of those guys who's it doesn't really matter what you give them. You're probably going to end up with a pretty quality defense by the time it's over. So I'm interested to see how those guys mesh, but we all know it's going to be about the offense. They got to score more than they did last year. And hopefully just because I imagine we'll see a lot of AFC West football this year, because those are some of the marquee, like, dynasties franchises in the league. I hope that they're getting off the ground moving, because I don't want to be stuck watching the crap from the worst team in the AFC West again, you know.
Man, you know, you mentioned we've gotten excited about the AFC West before. It was that 2022 season. I actually remember I was hosting the show with Austin Eckler at the time, and we had talked about this in the preseason. Like, man, this AFC West is so loaded. We should do like a segment every week called like As the AFC West Turns, just because, man, that's gonna be such a fun division to watch. And then like 4 weeks into the season, we gotta scrap that because it's like one of these teams is coached by Nate Hackett. There's like Josh McDaniels in the mix, and his own team, Brandon Staley. Like, we've just got a much better coaching lineup here in the AFC West now. But with Pete Carroll, I think that is going to be more of a floor setter than. Let's talk about, once we get like better than 6 wins here, what's the ceiling of this, and can they be better than one of these other teams like Los Angeles or like Denver in their own division? I think that's sort of up for debate. Give me your next new face, new place here.
The next one I have is a new face in an old place, newish face, or an old place, an old face, a new face in an old place. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say.
Whatever.
Doesn't matter. Robert Saleh is back with the 49ers. Which I found funny at first because, like, wow, you really look wide and far for your next defensive coordinator, the guy that you had before he went to the Jets. But I do think it makes a whole lot of sense on surface, right? Like, there was an interesting point, I guess, with the Jets last year where kind of, as I don't know if it's because Robert Saleh got fired, but the inflection point kind of is when he got fired, they never looked close to the defense that they had the previous couple of years when they were one of the best defenses in the league. That was kind of the only thing that was working with the Jets, but that's fine if you're just going to bring him back to be your defensive coordinator. But what I think is interesting here is the pieces here are a lot different than the last time he was here. Like, there's a lot of roster turnover in the NFL, there's a lot of attrition. You still got Fred Warner, still got Nick Bosa, but now you're looking at rookies like Alfred Collins, Michael Williams on the defensive line. You've got Nick Barton at linebacker, Upton Stout at cornerback. So, like, these are guys that are going to be new faces that are going to be kind of being a crucial part of your run game and your pass defense. I just want to see how he's able to kind of get those guys up to speed quickly, because I do think he's a good defensive coach. I think he's proved that through San Francisco and New York now. So to see him kind of like get back into this new challenge with a bunch of green faces that he hasn't coached before, I think it's going to be pretty cool to see.
Yeah. And I think for all of the talk last year about how the offense went through this season from hell, and like totally they did, right? Like McCaffrey's going overseas to get his Achilles looked at. Ricky Pearsall's getting shot in the chest. Brandon Ayuk, they're fighting about the contract, and then they're fighting about the color of his shorts, and then he tears his ACL. Like, it was one thing after another on offense, that's for sure. Like, that defense has not been the unit that it should be for like basically 2 years now. And it really, ever since Robert Saleh has left the building, they've been sort of wandering the wilderness from a defensive perspective. And yeah, I actually think, like, what would they have done if Saleh had like gotten a head coaching job? And like,
right.
what was the second choice there?
I don't know who else is out there that Kyle knows and that he's friends with, because I guess that's one of the biggest things now. Well, no, he did hire Steve Wilks. I'm not really sure what their relationship was, but man, that was
sounds
really,
like it wasn't very good. By the way, that did not.
But it
wasn't
by
great.
the end, yeah, because you make it to the Super Bowl and you still get fired. Even though you just got Mahomes games to game. So we'll see. I just think it's really interesting, a really interesting mix of players. And I used to kind of find these like homecoming stories weird. I'm like, man, why would you want to work at some place you've already been before? But it's like a different situation than it was with Vance Joseph. Vance Joseph in the Broncos, because Vance got fired and then he came back as a defensive coordinator for 2 staffs. So at least there's no bad blood like that. So I'm interested to see how he gets these guys moving.
Yeah, and that defense, again, it's a pivotal unit this year, and they need some things to break right. They need Williams to be kind of ready to rock. I think they need the secondary to be a little bit, that's certainly better than it's been of late. And obviously there's some personnel changeover, but a lot riding on Robert Saleh, because I think the offense is going to be good if everybody is healthy, which obviously is an if at this point. Like, guys have been, Ayuk is coming off an injury. I mentioned McCaffrey. He's healthy right now being the operative word. Trent Williams, is he going to still continue to play at the level that he's played at this age? But as long as the offense, those guys are out there, that's going to be a good unit. Shoot, it wasn't even statistically that bad of a unit last year, but if they're going to get back to the heights that we used to imagine for the 49ers, like Saleh and that defense are going to have to lift a lot of heavy weight there. Because you mentioned Steve Wilks, the last one that I wanted to throw out here, like Aaron Glenn in New York, I continue to be really fascinated about this whole experience because I feel like for the first time in a minute here, because Aaron Rodgers is gone, like there's no expectations on this Jets team. And like, if I was a Jets fan, this is exactly where I'd want to live. Like, nobody's really talking about the Jets. Nobody's paying attention to them from a national perspective. But you've got a coach in here who seems serious. And I actually love the fact that he hired Steve Wilks as the defensive coordinator, because I think that's just going to keep Glenn as like kind of that, hey, I'm the CEO guy. I'm in charge. I touch a little bit of everything here. You can also see his fingerprints on the offensive side of the ball, hiring Tanner Engstrand as a passing game corner. He's an unknown variable, but man, I just went back and charted Garrett Wilson for reception perception. Almost anything is going to be better than the design of that offense last year, right? Like bad. That was rough. And obviously it's what Aaron wanted. It's static. It's a lot of go routes, slants, and out routes, and that's it. No like dynamic motion, anything like that. So spread out. It's going to be a lot more condensed this year, I would guess. And I think they're going to run the ball a hell of a lot better with Fields under center. And obviously if Breece Hall is healthy. So I don't know. It's again, I don't have like high expectations for the Jets. I'm not sitting here deluding myself that they're going to be a great team, but I'm actually interested to watch this team on a week-to-week basis. Like they might be like an NFL pro team, right? Where, hey, right. I go back and watch them on like Tuesday and Wednesday, and I'm interested to see what they're doing, even if they're not putting it in the win column.
There's going to be some rough moments for sure. Yes. There's going to be some rough moments. I mean, I think Justin Fields probably is what he is at this point, which is to say, I think he's like, how we were talking about the Saints earlier, where that could be a team you hate to play. I think Justin Fields could be like the perfect quarterback for this build of the Jets as they try to transition to what's next, where you've got Olu Fashanu at left tackle, who was friggin' awesome towards the end of the season last year when he got to step in and play left tackle. He looked like a franchise guy. And then you got Mumbo, who they drafted this year, who's going to man right tackle. They've drafted Joe Tittman before, who's played center. So there's investments on the offensive line. And then you get Justin Fields, where it's like you have to run with him. Like if you're going to maximize this, like you absolutely have to run with him, and which opens up a lot of stuff that's going to give defenses headaches. Now, there's going to be some games where they score like 13 points and it looks like crap, but the games like where it's actually clicking and they're playing tough defense on the other side, like they're going to give some good teams some headaches this year, just because if Steve Wilks can get this thing moving back in motion, like get Sauce Gardner playing back to the level that we know he can, basically everyone except for Quinnen Williams last year needs to get back to playing to the level that we know that they can, and at least Wilks is a qualified mind to try and get that across the finish line. So if you got run game, you should have a good defense. That's going to cause a lot of headaches, and who knows, maybe you can even upset a good team every now and then this season.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like the offense might score 13, 16 points some weeks, but if this defense comes together, I could see them holding a maybe not a good team, but a mediocre team to like 10 points. And then again, you just got to score more points than the other team, right? Like, and that might be just enough. But that it's a great point to bring up about the defense, because, dude, I didn't realize this, but like they were 17th in success rate last year, 21st in EPA per play on defense. Like this was
bad
statistic, and I mean it felt that way watching it, but you just kind of forget after the course of the summer that, oh yeah, like that was an actively below average defense by the end of the season, like cumulatively. Obviously it really fell off once they fired Robert Saleh and promoted Jeff Ulbrich, but yeah, you go back and think about it, like if that's a unit that could return to being a top 10 form, like that might be just enough for this team. Again, not to be good, not to push for like a wild card spot, but just to be like annoying to play against.
Yeah, and I think that can even be just a good start for the Aaron Glenn regime. I mean, the Jets have put so little on terms of like good tape, good feelings, good vibes recently, that I think even if you just have like a scrappy 7-10 team that you've set yourself up to maybe do something where maybe you can talk yourself into, hey, if we move up for a quarterback next year, we actually have a nice base for this. I think that this is like a nice starter kit for where they need to be come week one. It's kind of like the opposite of where the Giants are. Like if I was looking at the Giants and I was like, oh, this is year one of what you guys are doing. Okay. We'll see what the young guys got a couple of vets, and then we'll reassess next year. As an all-in strategy, it looks really bad. But for the Jets, like as this is your start, I do like this. And I'm really intrigued to see just how they decide to build the offense and really more importantly, build that passing game up because like I said, Justin Fields is who he is. He's an inconsistent thrower. He's not always the most accurate guy. And I know that Garrett Wilson has really been craving to play with someone who can play a little bit more on time. So we'll see how that goes this season.
I think Garrett Wilson's just I think he's actually craving for the opposite. Like, don't make me like, oh, it's got to be at this depth or this. Just like when I'm open, throw that thing. And I do think Fields could maybe do a little bit more of that than Rodgers did. But you got one more to throw out here before we throw to Nate and the top 10 coaches?
Yeah, the last one I think is really fascinating. So the Lions are replacing Ben Johnson, who went to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears, as everyone knows, with offensive coordinator John Morton. This was really interesting to me because John hasn't really like called plays like that in a while. Like the last time he was the offensive coordinator was 2017 for the New York Jets. That was like the weird Josh McCown season where they just had like YOLO balls and things were kind of working. They were scoring some touchdowns. And I remember when I was working at SB Nation, then I was doing a piece on like big plays, and the Jets that season, they had like one of the highest big plays percentage in the NFL. So I interviewed John about that. And they're like his philosophy, it's just a lot different from what they were just doing last year, if you're looking at Ben as like this meticulous, we're going to be, under center, we're going to build this and this and that, and we're going to be doing a whole lot of play action. That wasn't really what John's thing was with the Jets. Now he has spent some time. He was with the Broncos last year, Sean Payton's pass game coordinator, and then he spent some time with the Raiders and the Lions prior to that. So I guess this isn't like a totally unfamiliar face because he was there a few years ago, but I'm just fascinated to see like where they end up, like I guess splitting the difference between what he likes to do and what the Lions have been doing. And also you can kind of get a question on if you are so inclined to go back and watch the 2017 Jets season, like how much of their kind of just flinging the ball down the field was out of necessity because they weren't like the most consistent down and down offense. And if you have better players with the Lions, maybe you don't have to live like that. So I just think it's a really interesting fit from where a guy has been to what he's going to be kind of expected to do, because I would imagine that the players and especially Jared Goff would be most comfortable running stuff that they did last year, but it's not always a good fit. And you see like these conflicts come sometimes. So I'm interested to see where it goes.
I'm so glad that you brought this up, and we won't go too long on it, but I have like a ton of stuff on this because I just taped a whole episode on the fantasy show. It's kind of like a contrarian corner thing. Like, hey, what if the Lions offense falls apart without Ben Johnson? Like, again, I'm not saying that it's going to, but like, what if that happens? Because it's not the craziest thing in the world, but nobody's framing it. I'm sure even when we talk about Dan, I don't remember it because this was forever ago, but I'm sure when we talk about Dan Campbell in the top 10 coaches episode, I might even say myself, like, and I think the offense will be fine because Dan Campbell has an offensive background and he worked with John Morton before, and like that's all great, but you mentioned this Jets offense in 2017 wasn't the most successful down to down. They were 32nd in success rate that year. 32nd. Reminder, folks, there are 32 teams in the NFL, and your Falcons, and I hate to bring this up, but your Falcons were kind of like, to me, a good example of like this playing out in practice, where that 2016 offense, I mean, it was unbelievably efficient. They were first in EPA per play, third in success rate, first in explosive play rate, and first in points per game. I mean, yeah, it was awesome. Didn't end well, but it was an awesome offense. Awesome. And the Lions last year under Ben Johnson were third in EPA per play, first in success rate, second in explosive play rate, first in points per game. So a top 3 offense by any measure. In 2017, the Falcons, Kyle Shanahan moves on. Steve Sarkisian's calling plays. They were still a good offense, 6th in EPA per play, 3rd explosive play rate, 3rd in success rate, but they were 13th in points per game. And like even that, like that type of drop off happening, I think that would actually be a pretty good outcome for the Lions if they don't fall off a cliff there. But still, going from 1st in points per game to 13th, that might be a pretty big deal in a very tough division. So there's a lot riding on John Morton, not just like, hey, keeping the offense the same from a language perspective and stuff like that for Goff, but just keeping it that efficient is going to be pretty big here.
Yeah, that's the big thing, because they're still a team that probably feels like they should compete for a title. I mean, why not? You have a whole lot of resources and money tied into this team, and we know that this is one of the best teams in the NFL. I mean, shoot, even if you go back to that game, the divisional game that they lost to Washington, like if Jared Goff doesn't have those turnovers when he did, they might have scored like 60 points, man. Like they were shredding. The run game was out of this world, and Jared, like the passing game was working well, except like those 3 plays where turn it over, and those will kill you, especially when your defense has a bad day. But like their expectation for themselves should be, we're going to be one of the best offenses in the league again. But it gets tricky, when you have the offensive coordinator switch, you have some movement on the offensive line. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's really, really hard to stay on top of the mountain in the NFL. And I think the Lions are going to be a really interesting case study, just to see like how stable is this thing as they start to move forward, and see what's next after Glenn and Johnson got their new jobs.
Super interesting. I'm glad we talked about those Lions guys, because again, we're going to talk Dan Campbell here pretty heavily in our top 10 coaches segment. Let's throw it to that. Let's throw it to Nate and our top 10 coaches right now.